Hello, hello. Simplex is the name, Eurospy is the game. Today we're back in 1965, considering a Spanish, Italian, French Eurospy film created by Nicola Nostro, who was also referred to as the Professor, not to, however, be confused with the fictional character called the Professor in the last film I reviewed. Today's film features a lot of scenes of Nouvelle Vague inspiration alongside characters firing at point-blank range and missing. Plus, there's a recurring golden spider motif. It's Operation Counterspy, or as it was originally titled, Assaut di Piche, which I'm sure I've completely butchered. Welcome back to Eurospy Cinema, a series where I review various movies that fit into the Eurospy category. Our film first begins with a very cool title sequence. This is definitely one of the best title sequences of all the Eurospies I've reviewed over the years. I just love these animated portions integrated with the live inserts. It's very cool. Top marks to whoever did these titles. They did a really great job. After these titles, we open on a casino, where our main character, Lord Moriston, is busy giving a beautiful lady at the roulette table the key to his villa, before leaving to be railroaded by his boss, Chief, outside to drink some tea. He's instructed then to take on the persona of a very good safecracker, Von Bliss, the Velvet Paw, and live in his villa and all that. Incidentally, we've seen the Chief's butler before. Franco is played here by Emilio Messina, who we saw in the last film I reviewed, Super 7 Calling Cairo. After this little tete-a-tete, Lord Moriston goes off and kidnaps Von Bliss and takes on his persona, then going to meet with his contact to participate in a heist. We get a nice bit of Nouvelle Vague-esque camera work here before his contact then proceeds to try and kill him. Why set off an unsilenced gun mid-robbery while your victim is sleeping only upstairs? Who knows? Anyway, following a punch-up, Moriston notices that his accomplice was wearing a spider necklace before she's shot. We then find out that the important info in the safe were pictures of 6 cities. A few more punches later, and Moriston arrives in a club where there is a dancer with another golden spider, and he tries offering to sell her the photos because, I don't know, he had nothing else to do or something. Then this blue barbershop quartet of villains try to catch Moriston to no avail, and he's rescued by the dancer, which is curious, who then tries to kill him for supposedly killing her sister. Nonetheless, instead of perhaps talking to Alina the dancer, he then decides that blackmailing the baddies using the photographs is still the best course of action, and he tries that again. The main baddie, Karatas, refuses, saying that Moriston has no bargaining power since he has no idea what the purpose of the photos are, which kind of works, sort of? I don't know, I feel like there's got to be something more here, but I'm not exactly sure. I haven't quite figured out exactly what's wrong with that logic. But anyway, it works. So Moriston leaves. And once again, he's chased by the blue barbershop quartet. However, he's caught this time with a net, which is a bit odd, and is chained to a chair in a very interesting method. Nonetheless, he's tortured, and we find out that Moriston has been hiding underneath the baddie's house. I mean, this might be a mistake with dubbing or something, and they're still actually at Von Bliss's place somewhere else, but I do kind of want it to be that they're hiding under the baddie's house, because that's just so funny that they've been doing all their secret operations entirely just underneath the bad guy's place the entire time. That's hilarious. Anyway, the bad guys then suggest a float downstream in a concrete overcoat, but Moriston declines, and after this we see Karatas actually has a boardroom of blue people, of whom he proceeds to scold for their considerable incompetence. Meanwhile, Moriston has figured out that if you draw a line between each city, they intersect on another city, so I guess that must be the point of the photographs. So, turns out, inside the spy's room in this specific city, there is a code pointing to one of the bad guys' ships, the Phoebus. Meanwhile, the baddies kidnap the dancer and Moriston sneaks on board via anchor. Upon arriving at the port, Alina is kidnapped, but this time by some of Moriston's friends, who looked after her for a while. Don't know why they needed to give Alina such a heart attack by making her think she was being kidnapped, but anyway, poor thing, she's okay now. Moriston then follows the baddies into the desert, a place which seems to have a miraculous amount of water as well. the baddies have a secret base in this desert where they plan to launch their atomic missiles from. They plan to cause the world to be engulfed in war and then take over, all while wearing some of the most exceptionally unflattering outfits I think I've seen in this entire series of reviewing Eurospy films. Moriston then, using his great powers of deduction, wanders through the desert and happens to stumble on the lair by finding a random crate hastily disguised under a bush in the middle of a plateau. He proceeds to then break a bullet from his gun and use the charge to make a bomb and blow off the grate. Using his Geiger counter watch that he just now has, he discovers that there's an atomic warhead here, and so he decides, why not just rig it to explode? So he does that, and then he disguises himself as one of the silver spider suit people. Meanwhile, they kind of, they overlay the screen with a clock to show you how much time's left for him, which is a kind of cool effect, actually. I do quite like that. During this, Karatas tortures his right-hand woman, apparently called Pat, I think? I'm not 100% sure, on a special spider torture device with 1 million volts. But Moriston turns this against him instead and kills Karatas with it. But the girl's already swallowed poison, so it's too late for her too now, I suppose. We find out here, though, that she was the fiancée to the guy from the beginning who took the original photos in an effort to stop Karatas. She dies, but George promises that he's going to give her ring here back to her mother in Russia, which is nice of him. Moriston then escapes the lair, and after the explosion wakes up to see his tea-drinking boss congratulating him. He then returns to his home, only to run into the girl from the beginning of the film, deciding to sleep with her in place of the dancer, and the film ends with a knowing wink from the butler. From an overall view, the plot is fine. A character stumbles upon something much bigger than he imagines. He follows his leads and eventually he figures out what the bad guys are up to and stops them. Unfortunately though, it's not really the most compelling mystery. Our hero spends most of his time stumbling from one situation into another with very little intrigue or curiosity being aroused as to what is actually going on, until the final act when everything just kind of falls into place miraculously for him. From that standpoint, the script is pretty weak. There's no suspense, no worries as to what the villains are going to do, and as for the most part, we have absolutely no idea that the world is even in danger for most of the film. And to add to this, the intro of the film, and probably for the whole first half of it, I actually had no idea who our main character was, as it was just treated as if, yeah, you already know this guy, don't you? We don't need to introduce him for you. It's a really bizarre choice. Because, for instance, at first I thought he was actually the thief that was kidnapped at the beginning. Then I figured out, oh no, he's taking the identity of the thief. But then there was the question of where he was living, so for a long time I thought, oh no, this is Moriston's own villa, but only later do we realise that actually he's living in the thief's villa. It's just a really confusing intro, which completely screws the full first half of the film, making you just so confused as to what's even going on. It definitely could have done with just more fleshing out, better cues to what was going on, rather than a couple of just random throwaway lines that we got here and there that were our entire plot explanations. Interestingly though, this film actually was slated to have a sequel made, as it was quite popular on release. However, this did end up falling through, as the lead man, George Ardisson, was busy with another project. Though speaking of George, let's discuss our leading man, Lord George Moriston. Overall, I don't like him. I really hate making snap judgments, but I just really did not like George since his first scene. And throughout the film, his acting just completely failed to impress me. It's not that he's a bad actor. I mean, yes, his English voice actor is interesting, but overall, he acts okay. It's just that his major letdown is the fact that he's just so young. I don't feel like this guy is an experienced spy. He feels a bit like a kid, like a novice to the trade, not the cool, calm spy master that the film really wants us to believe him to be. Although, to be honest, the character does feel almost like a proto-Brett Sinclair from The Persuaders, in that he's this sort of English lord, playboy type who is lured into working on cases once in a while just for the fun of it. All of this, unfortunately, without the charm or charisma that Roger Moore brought to the character of Brett Sinclair in The Persuaders. He overall's bearable, but I just wish we got a different actor at least. The character in of himself does a lot of weird things, so that combined with a poorly chosen actor just really doesn't help the film, unfortunately. Nonetheless, he does look pretty cool in this stunt at the beginning of the film. It's definitely one of his better moments. For the sake of plot convenience, annoyingly, George has a habit of missing at point-blank range. And just in general, George's character very much has a habit of things just conveniently happening to him, especially as we enter the final act, where it's clear that the scriptwriters just kind of needed him to be in the right place at the right time to make some rather large leaps and bounds in logic and location so the plot could continue to happen. Even just take here when he's getting to the bad guy lair. He gets lost in the desert, and then when all hope is lost, he suddenly stumbles upon this poorly concealed grate and finds the base, and the world is saved. Or you could bring up how he happens to have brought a watch with a Geiger counter in it, even though this is never mentioned before. Who knew he had this watch? Overall, though, George does try really hard. The actor tries really hard in this role, and you can see he's putting a lot of effort in. But I find him pretty unconvincing as a secret agent, and the script really just doesn't help him. I wouldn't have minded even if we got Gordon Scott from Danger Death Ray. I just personally think that Ardisson is just not quite fitted to the role of, Bond-style secret agent. I'm not super familiar with any of his other work, so you never know, we might see him in another film. He might be really great in another film, but in this one, I don't think he was the right fit. Second build, we have Lena von Martens as Alina, the dancer with the golden spider and the sister of the woman at the beginning of the film, who tries to kill George after he cracks the safe. She's quite fine. As opposed to George, I actually do find her performance quite reasonably convincing. I actually do really like the plot point that she's the sister of the woman who attempted to kill George in the beginning. Sorry, I can't remember her name. It kind of harkens a bit back to Goldfinger with Tilly Masterton, which probably would have released during the production of this film, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was at least a slight influence on this film. For the most part, she does, though, just kind of hang around after her big moment in the introduction, trying to kill George. She just kind of fades into the background, which is a pity, as that moment in the beginning is really good. Even having her kidnapped would have been something, because as it stands in the film, it feels like she's just kind of purposely sidelined, as there are too many female characters for the conclusion of the film. Or, for all I know, they just ran out of ideas for what they could do with her. She doesn't even show up at the climax, which is a massive shame, as she could have been the one to electrocute Curatus, instead of the semi-tacked-on character that is Pat, his right-hand henchwoman, taking all the thunder. I guess perhaps because Thunderball still hadn't come out by the time this film was made, they hadn't had time to get inspiration perhaps from Domino, who did a similar thing in Thunderball. And speaking of Pat, let's talk about her. She's played by Helen Chanel, and she does a really good job with what she's given. But unfortunately, a lot like Alina, she practically has nothing to do in the film. She saunters around a lot and acts generally evil, and that's quite nice. It's a pity she got the climactic kill on Curatus though, as we only really get character development on her until after that, and that's only like a 2-minute scene then we get as a full explanation of her entire backstory and her as a character. It would have been way cooler to find out who she was before the event, as I actually think her motivations are some of the most well thought out of all the characters in the film. It's great. I love the idea of her hating Curatus for killing her partner and biding her time to eventually bump him off and foil his plan. That's a really great bit of character development. However, it's practically rendered completely useless, as not only do we find this out after she's killed Curatus, she herself dies a couple seconds later after telling George this, because she took a cyanide pill. It feels like a massive waste, this character, unfortunately. Overall, though, she's quite fine, and her up against the giant spider thing on the wall is probably one of the most memorable elements of this film. But yeah, unfortunately, she just kinda has nothing to do, and there's really not much more I can say about her, unfortunately. Next up, we have Karatas, who I believe is played by Joaquin Diaz, but I can't be too certain as there are no photos of the actor online and the billing doesn't give us any character names. However, it seems pretty likely that this is him since he's fourth billed. Nonetheless, let's discuss Karatas. He's very mustache twirly. Think Blofeld, Drax, and of course this film was probably most likely inspired by Goldfinger and its titular character from 1964. It's pretty obviously seen in the character of Karatas, who is obsessed with spiders. We see numerous golden spider necklaces on his henchwomen, and of course the spider painting thingy on the wall at the end of the film. However, this also is a motif when he dons his silver jumpsuit, which I think does him zero favours. Like, he really looks better when he's in one of his numerous sort of sharper suits. Though I must say, some shots, due to the poor quality of this film, also make it look like his beard might be false, so that's also not a great point in his favour. Unfortunately though, Karatas is not that great of a villain. I like what they were going for. His relationship with Pat and Alina and his slow, methodical delivery of lines is really good. You can see that they were really going for that intellectual type, the type who's quiet but with outbursts of rage, like Goldfinger, you know. However, Karatas kinda has no time to develop. He spends a lot of his time being soft-spoken, and then the fact that he has, like, completely incompetent henchmen really doesn't help. He does eventually get a nice couple moments to really shine, like in this meeting where he berates his henchmen. It's quite a reasonable scene, and definitely adds a bit of menace to him. But I think due to his dubbing, it definitely is let down a lot more, especially since this scene clocks in at 52 minutes into the film. And we do get a few moments like this as we move on, but I feel like it's just a little too little too late, you know? Like, especially since the plan is borderline completely undeveloped up to this point. And this, I guess, leads into probably my biggest issue with Karatas. What is he actually trying to do? We have little to no reason to fear this guy, as until about an hour and a half or so through the film, we still have no idea what he wants to do. All he's done so far, up to this point, is he's said that he wants some photos, he's executed a henchman, and there's been one reasonably well done torture scene. It's not really out of the ordinary for any bad guy in any Eurospy. We do eventually find out that his objective is to create nuclear missiles and prompt a nuclear war. I mean, this is a very common trope amongst many Eurospy films, and at least it's something. It's nice to have a threat, a big threat. And it definitely does lend a lot of gravitas to Karatas and his presence as a villain, but it is so way too late in the film when we find out about this. If we compare this to Goldfinger, like in that film we get little trickles of information, little bits of information as to what the threat is for the main villain as the film progresses. First we, find out he just cheats at cards. Next he kills one of his female henchmen. Then he threatens Bond with Oddjob in his hat. Then we hear about Operation Grand Slam and so on and so on. It's not all like super crammed in at the end of the film. The audience is slowly fed these little bits of information about Goldfinger to build him up as a baddie. And that's not to say that Karatas is a terrible villain. He's fine. He serves his purpose, and the actor tries his best, and you can really see what they were going for. But it just unfortunately falls short of what it could have been. He could have been a really good bad guy. And you can see touches of it throughout, like how Karatas' henchmen laugh on command. That's a great thing. And when the actor is finally given a scene to properly get into it, he really throws himself into it. It's really unfortunate that an actor who's seems so suited and keen to play such a role is let down by such a poor script. I think that's the thing that disappoints me the most about his character, is that he could have been so much better and he unfortunately is not. And now we're on to the highlight of the film. I always find in these films, I tend to have like one actor, one character who I just love a lot. And in this film, we've got an actor who's elevated every Eurospy film I've seen him in. Emilio Messina as Franco. We last saw Franco in Super 7 Calling Cairo, if you've seen that episode of Eurospy Cinema. And once again in this film, he absolutely shines. In fact, this might be my favourite of all the roles I've seen him in. Franco is this almost silent butler type for Moriston in the film. He starts as being a sidekick for George's boss, serving the two of them tea, but then he just kind of randomly starts working for George throughout the film, which is nice of him. He's stoic, quiet, physically powerful. Franco is like a good guy odd job. His character is a really interesting addition to an otherwise very sort of straightforward, very by-the-books Eurospy film. He even pulls off some cool stunts in the action scenes. Honestly, it's just nice having Franco in this film. His character on the whole doesn't add much, but he's surprisingly one of the most well-defined characters we have, and I think that's what makes him so memorable. All the other characters are very stereotypical, but Franco is so unique, you just can't help but like this very fresh character they've introduced. In fact, Franco almost dies at one point in the film, and I was so concerned, because I was like, this guy is amazing, please don't kill him off. But that's enough rambling about characters, let's talk about music. So, the music for the film was written by Franco Paisano. We've actually heard his music before, back in Destino Istanbul 68, and Destino Istanbul's music was pretty solid. Unfortunately, I'm not as keen on what we hear here. That's not to say it's bad, it has its good moments, but it's often let down by the fact that it just kinda doesn't fit any of the scenes it's played in. As is a common thing I've mentioned in a few of other Eurospy films I've reviewed, we get a lot of music here that you could kind of just classify as lounge jazz. And I mean, I like lounge jazz. I don't think it's a bad thing. I love lounge jazz, but I don't think lounge jazz is a great choice to be played over a fight scene. Things like that. However, the main theme for this film is quite reasonable, and overall, I reckon this gave Franco a bit of experience, so that 2 years later, when he scored Destino Istanbul 68, the score for that film was so much better. Action-wise, this film delivers pretty well too. I mean, we get quite a bit from Franco, who definitely carries the action in my opinion. I wouldn't say that George does a great job, however he does get involved in some, honestly, pretty memorable fights. Like the one here with the guy with two knives, it's pretty cool. Or you've got this pretty cool chase with all of Karatas's blue-clad henchmen. Even if the henchmen are really, really stupid at times, that it definitely can let down the action a little bit. No wonder Karatas dresses them down so many times. Their incompetence is very palpable in this film. We also get a pretty solid car chase about halfway through the film, which I definitely respect. It's definitely not the most original thing, but very competently done. I do like this scene. George even has a gadget at one point, which is a pretty neat stunt. He uses this explosive bullet to blow up a car. It's definitely not the most original or impressive thing by today's standards, but I like the idea behind it. George is at his wit's end with these baddies, and after a good, prolonged action sequence, he finally resorts to a much more grounded gadget, the old explodey bullet, just managing to save the day. It's quite well done. I really respect the idea. In fact, the film even delivers us some pretty good stunt work. At about 10 minutes in, we get this really nice dive, which I really enjoyed for a bit of added stakes and realism. It's nice to get some good stunts for the main character. It just adds that kind of Bondian, sort of Superman-y kind of character flavour, which I think was missing in other scenes with George's character. Cinematographically, the film is pretty solid. Stuff is presented in a pretty straightforward manner. We do, however, get a few glimpses of something more with, some touches of Nouvelle Vague. For instance, we get some quite interesting close-ups of eyes in the heist at the beginning of the film. Or we get these shots of George and the henchmen running around the theatre. We get a few slightly funnier cuts later on though, with, for instance, this very strange editing of George when he's thrown into a chair to be interrogated early in the film. And of course, I guess it's a continuity error, or just an unfortunate issue when trying to procure the right model of car, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it, and I'm sorry to tell you about this now, but the car's lighting changes between green and white between shots here. You can't believe how annoying this is once you notice it. It's hilarious. But yeah, overall, Operation Counterspy is a reasonably good film. It's unfortunately let down by generally average character writing, besides of course the amazing Franco, and annoyingly the biggest letdown is our leading man, which definitely is a bit of a dampener. However, you can totally see the vision here. The bad guy is almost great, just held back by a poor script. The spider motif's really cool. There's quite a bit of pretty well choreographed action. And I would say this definitely does make up for a number of the weaker moments. The action definitely can make up for the poor moments in the script and is overall quite well done. However, don't go into this expecting something psychological and interesting. This film is certainly not. This film is very much a turn off your brain kind of film. The plot holes can be really annoying at times, so I just kind of recommend going along for the ride, and I reckon you'll find it quite amusing. Anyway, that's all I have time for this episode of Eurospy Cinema, so I'll see you later. Goodbye.